Hello there. Welcome in to a Wednesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on 740 KVOR, Extra Sports 1300, or you're listening through the apps of those two radio stations, probably not both at the same time, but whichever one you choose, they are free to download, they are free to use, and they are sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all, a veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the program, and I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Busy night sports-wise on the docket. We'll talk about a lot of it. Do you want to hear some foolishness? I want to hear some foolishness on this Wednesday. Here is now excommunicated Nuggets general manager Calvin Booth. He's been fired. Speaking out, I believe for the first time. I don't think I've heard Calvin Booth speak since he got fired. And, well, I'll just let you be the judge of what he says to Kevin O'Connor on his podcast.
And the last thing is, I think I just made it look too easy.
What do you mean by that? A little too easy.
All right, so you're a podcaster, journalist, anybody that's really good at something, when they make it look easy, that was really, really hard to get to. A lifetime's worth of playing basketball, being coaching basketball, having conversations, scouting, doing whatever. For me to make it go in there right away, assemble a championship team, win a championship. I think when you take the Joker thing, the head coach paradox, ownership and their precedence, and hey, look, they have a formula that works. Championships in hockey, basketball, football. Arsenal will probably get one soon. I mean, and it's their prerogative to operate that way, and I think it's the right call. I'll probably disagree with their take upon executives, especially in this world, but like, who am I? They've been so successful, right? Maybe it's the right way to operate. But I'll say that you encompass that, all that, and some media manipulation, and then all of a sudden, somehow, some way, I'm not running an NBA team right now.
All right. First off, what caught your ear? Had to be the I made it look easy. Right? That has to be the thing, because that's the thing that jumped out to me. Like, wait, what? You made it look easy. And then he goes later and says the Jokic thing, which what he's referring to is that everyone thinks it's easy because you have the best player in the world. So he says it's harder to put together a team around the best player in the world, but he also made it look easy. Like, this dude, this is a live updating of his LinkedIn profile that the guy is campaigning so hard to get another job in the NBA. And maybe he should get another job in the NBA. But look, the reason why you made it, quote unquote, look easy is because the team was basically assembled for you. Like, the Christmas tree was already up. It was put together. Most of the ornaments were on. You just had to place the star atop it. And he did, to his credit. A Christmas tree is nothing without a star at the top. And the Nuggets needed Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You have to give them at least that level of credit that they meant enough to the Denver Nuggets that maybe they don't win without them. And Calvin Booth gets credit for it, but don't sit there and make it seem like you built this thing from scratch. Tim Connolly gave you so much to work off of. Right? He laid all that groundwork. He drafted Nikola Jokic. He drafted Jamal Murray. He made the trade for Aaron Gordon. That's the core. He drafted Michael Porter. That's the core of your team. Okay? And that's the core of a team that, not Aaron Gordon because he joined the team after, but Tim Connolly had built a team that at least went to the Western Conference Finals. And then he added Aaron Gordon. We didn't get to see what it would all look like for a couple years because of Jamal Murray's injury. But, like, he wasn't left with scraps. He went out and made 2 shrewd additions to round out the Denver Nuggets. But the heavy lifting was done by his predecessor. And I don't want to take away credit from Calvin Booth. But when he says he made it look easy, yeah, there was a reason, because the job was 85% done. Like, let's be real about this. That's why you made it look easy. Your first 2 moves were great moves. But adding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown without all the pieces that Tim Connolly put into place, wouldn't have won a championship. And then he goes on, to say that everyone thinks it's easy, basically, when you have the best player in the world. Well, it's easier. It should be easier to be able to build a team around the best player in the world. I think Calvin Booth is someone who is looking at his prospects after getting fired and like, why do you think he's doing the podcast? He's doing the podcast to get his side of the story out so he could try to get another job in the NBA. And judging by that fact, probably not a lot of teams are interested in Calvin Booth. I wonder why that might be. Could it be because other teams don't necessarily feel like he made it look easy or recognize what I just talked about? I mean, there was a reason why Minnesota went all out to try and land Tim Connolly. I mean, the saying, the market speak, let the market speak. Well, the market is speaking on Calvin Booth, and maybe they're not giving him as much credit as he feels like he deserves for the Nuggets championship. Of course, the impetus of this rift between him and Michael Malone is about the younger players. Strawther, Pickett, Najee, Brown, and Watson. And as somebody who tries to create a metaphor when he talks about sports, I got to say what Calvin Booth did here, it's a pretty good one, but see if you buy his reasoning when he's talking about his track record in terms of finding the players, the young players in the draft to help supplement this roster and to keep that championship window open.
I think about it like this. All right, so you have a headache, right? And you want to take a Tylenol to get rid of the headache, but it makes you drowsy. Do you want to get rid of the headache or not get rid of the headache? Because if you want to get rid of the headache, you have to take the whole pill. So you cannot separate Payton Watson and Christian Brown from some of the other things that people weren't happy with, right?
I do take an entire pill when I have a headache, so he's right about that. But therein lies the flaw in what Calvin Booth was trying to do. Right? Because let's take the whole thing. Okay, let's take the whole pill. Okay, the fact of the matter is you drafted Christian Brown, who I think in some ways was a downgrade from Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And the big idea was Christian Brown would be just as good, if not better, than Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was the year prior. I don't buy that that's the case. But Christian Brown has become I like Christian Brown in the role he had when they won a title. I like that better than the role he has now, if I'm being honest. Payton Watson, yes, has blossomed this year. So credit for Christian Brown and Payton Watson. But you drafted Julian Strawther. You drafted Jalen Pickett. You drafted and then signed Zeke Naji to a deal that has continued to hamstring yourself and the Nuggets organization because they got this albatross of a contract. So I think, look, it's fair. I think most people are pleased with Christian Brown and now are pleased with what they have seen from Payton Watson, just in time for the Nuggets to lose him. But if you're going to build the team the way Calvin Booth did, you got to hit on all of them. And I understand that that's an unfair standard to hold somebody to. I mean, is his batting average good enough? He's not going to hit on everyone, even though he kind of need to. He kind of needs to. Was his batting average that good? I'd say it was solid. But again, why the Nuggets are championship contenders has very little to do with the players that he brought in. Right? He may have gotten some right through the draft and maybe deserves more credit considering how hard it is to draft in the 20s and be able to come up with quality, even role players, let alone a starter in Christian Brown. But again, the guys that are the reason why the Nuggets are champions more than anything else, and the reason why they are championship contenders right now are not guys that Calvin Booth brought in. And that's what I think Calvin Booth fails to understand. He inherited a Western Conference finalist, and then he proceeded to act like he built this team from scratch. He felt like he could just impose his will on Michael Malone and say, you have to play these guys. And Michael Malone turned around and looked at him and said, who the heck are you to tell me that? Like, what have you accomplished? I won a title, same as you, and I was around building this team up when you weren't. So you can get a glimpse into the way that Calvin Booth and Michael Malone interacted, because Calvin Booth is a guy that, and I understand, you want to make your case, you're trying to get another job, that's fine. Again, the thing about Christian Brown and Payton Watson, you know what? Fair enough. But you can tell that he walked around the hallways like he had built this team from nothing. And that wasn't the case. And when you walk around like that, when you didn't actually build that, then you're going to rub people the wrong way. And I'm not saying that Michael Malone was right in all of this, because he wasn't. Because what Calvin Booth was trying to do, there was a lot of merit to it, and Michael Malone never bought into it. So it's a pox on both houses. It's just that Calvin Booth is the one speaking. But my biggest takeaway from all of this is, man, these two guys just could not put away their ego to help see a team with the best player in the world on it through to a sustained championship window. The generational fumble that Michael Malone and Calvin Booth at the same time had is really astounding. But you get insight into it right there. Both men probably had outsized egos for what they deserve to have. And they just constantly fought. I mean, listening to Calvin Booth, I mean, even more in retrospect, Josh Kroenke clearly made the right move. That is a guy who is bordering on egomaniacal, who has very little reason to be that way. I don't think this sit down with Kevin O'Connor is going to work out the way he would have hoped. When you make it look easy. I could make winning a race look easy if Usain Bolt runs the first 3 quarters of it. I can finish. No, never mind. I can't. But you get my point. You can make it look easy when the most important pieces to the puzzle are already in place. And clearly Calvin Booth just did not understand that. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on Calvin Booth's comments. Just getting going on this Wednesday edition of the show. Back after this on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. The fallout from Sean Payton, surprisingly to many people, although isn't it just the way that these things go? Sean Payton hands over play calling duties to Davis Webb, and then I hear the same talking heads that said there was no way that he would, and go, oh, well, it was time. Okay. Anyway, Sean Payton announcing that at the combine that Davis Webb will take over play calling duties, although Sean Payton isn't going to be completely away from that aspect of the game. Here is Sean Payton.
I'm going to call some plays on game days. I'm going to have opinions with plays. Mine will be the bad ones. His will be all the good ones. But I want to support him in that. I can recall being in that situation. But I think that stepping back and looking at it, I think he'll do a fantastic job.
And you always expected this. Sean Payton has the veto power. To think that Sean Payton is going to be completely detached from play calling on game days is just never going to be the case. But guess what? All of these, offensive-minded head coaches, they all have this ability. Andy Reid in Kansas City, anytime he wants, can step in and overrule his offensive coordinators. Sean Payton always reserves that right. But this is a showing of trust in Davis Webb. And look, and I got a text yesterday, and I'm continuing to hear from people about the ego side of this with Sean Payton. His ego will never let him completely step away. What about how it feeds? And I talked about this when I first suggested that Sean Payton turn over play calling duties weeks ago. Same week the Broncos lost in the AFC Championship, if memory serves. What about, does it not feed someone's ego to see someone that they taught succeed? Like, everyone says that Sean Payton wants all the play calling due because of his ego. But if Davis Webb calls plays and does well, Sean Payton gets credit. You've seen in the NFL, these guys that are just, I mean, if they drink out of the same water bottle as Sean McVay, they get a head coaching job the very next cycle. And that just raises the profile and the legend of Sean McVay. We talk about the Shanahan coaching tree all the time. It is something that has become more and more, has come to the forefront more and more, I should say. And Sean Payton doesn't have quite as fruitful a tree as some of the people that he probably thinks he's in the same conversation as. So if Davis Webb, this is the thing about it. It is a win-win. I don't see the downside here for Sean Payton. You always reserve the right to overrule Davis Webb if he does something you really don't think he should do. You can always take the play calling duties back from him if he does a poor job. So it's not like you can never call plays ever again in the NFL. He's not forfeiting that right. And if Davis Webb looks great, then guess what? Sean Payton was the guy that elevated him. Sean Payton was the guy that fired his longtime friend and assistant, Joe Lombardi, to make Davis Webb the offensive coordinator. That move was noticed around the league. So, they must have some in Davis Webb. Sean Payton must like him a lot. Well, now if Davis Webb is successful, then it's like, wow, Sean Payton, he saw what Davis Webb was before anybody else did. So if this has to be about ego, it can feed his ego in a different way. But I don't care as much about Sean Payton's ego as I would care if I'm a Broncos fan about what is best for the Denver Broncos. And what is best for the Denver Broncos is that Sean Payton takes a small step back, empower the people that he hired. I mean, look at how good of a job Vance Joseph has done over the years. I don't think Sean Payton is super hands-on with the defense. Let Davis Webb focus on that. You do it. I mean, it's like as I'm talking through it, it's like a Jim Halpert, Michael Scott thing. Davis Webb is going to be Jim Halpert and Sean Payton will be Michael Scott. But like more competent and less funny. Sean Payton will oversee the big picture of any game. Right? We need to do this. Davis, we got to run the ball more, or we got to throw it more, or we got to exploit this in the opposing defense. And Davis Webb is going to be the one in the trenches, play call by play call, sequencing this thing up. There's just so much going on during a football game. And now there's a fine line here. Right? You don't want to be Nick Sirianni. You want to be Nick Sirianni, who you kind of look at him it's like every other year you look at Nick Sirianni and you're like, what is it that you actually do for the Philadelphia Eagles? Because you are completely coordinator dependent. I don't know that Sean Payton is coordinator dependent. The team did get to the AFC Championship game with him calling the plays. So he's not going to be that hands-off CEO type. And look, here's another reality of the situation. I've talked about this. If you're a rising star like Davis Webb is in NFL circles, you can ask for a little bit more. And with the number of teams that were interested in Davis Webb's services, he could probably go to Sean Payton and say, I love being here. I need a little something more. Okay, you're going to make me the offensive coordinator. That's great. I have other offensive coordinator offers or other teams interested in me. You going to give me play calling duties? So I want to give Sean Payton credit. I think he deserves credit because this is him realizing after he bungled the AFC Championship that he needs help. And it's a difficult thing to do, is to ask for help when you need it. And in his professional life, he needed help. After the AFC Championship, it was apparent that Sean Payton needed help. And he recognized that too. But this was a necessary move for the Denver Broncos, and Sean Payton's impact, Sean Payton's fingerprints, the credit given to Sean Payton, it will not go away. One other thing that Sean Payton brought up yesterday, I shouldn't say that it's not related, because I think part of this too, with empowering Davis Webb the way he has, I think it is Bo Nix centric. I think there's a little bit of the relationship between Davis Webb and Bo Nix that, Sean Payton has to be kind of the bad cop sometimes. And when the bad cop is in your ear constantly, it could wear on a player's nerves. And we have seen multiple times that Bo Nix and Sean Payton are kind of getting on each other's nerves. Meanwhile, when Bo Nix is sitting down by Davis Webb, it looks like they're best friends. And that's the dynamic that arises sometimes on NFL sidelines. You're closer to your position coach than you are your coordinator, and you're closer to your coordinator than you are your head coach. And to allow Bo Nix to continue to progress to allow him to flourish with the Denver Broncos, it's probably better if Sean Payton isn't in his ear constantly. And he hears that voice of somebody that clearly he gets along with. Sean Payton was asked about the latest little spat between him and his franchise quarterback regarding Bo Nix's supposed predisposition to the ankle injury he sustained in the second round or second game, I should say, it's second round of the AFC playoffs.
I'm not going to get into the injury. What I meant predisposed is there was a slight he's not, and there weren't multiple. So I have a problem, and Mike, I apologize. I have a problem when someone's quoting me to him on a conference call and they're inaccurate and they're one of our locals that shouldn't be.
Wow. You see why already Sean Payton has made it very clear in his time in Denver that he has much more affinity for the national media than he does the local media. It's just apparent. If you listen to Sean Payton, he's willing to, as they say, spill the tea to Diana Rossini and Chase Daniel and Colin Cowherd and all these national personalities. But when it comes to the guys that show up, guys and gals that show up every day, this is their job, is to cover the Denver Broncos. It's like trying to get the codes out of NORAD. Like, it's impossible. And he wasn't misquoted. And make sure I'm right, Ray. He said predisposed. He said Sean Payton said he was predisposed. Do you already have the quote out?
No, I don't, but it was his audio. It was,
right. Well, that's what I'm saying. He was not misquoted.
Yeah, it was his audio.
He said predisposed.
Yeah.
And I went on a whole thing talking about it that day. When you say someone is predisposed, this is not, the injury was bound to happen because there was already damage. Predisposed means that Bo Nix has like weak ankles or something. He used that word. He wasn't misquoted. And to, go after a reporter, especially one that has been on the Broncos beat longer than I've been alive, like, you want to go back and listen to yourself? And look, I don't expect Sean Payton to use the right word every single time he speaks. And I don't expect him to remember vividly everything he says in the countless press conferences that he conducts on a yearly basis. But please don't play the victim card and say that you were misquoted. Nathan McKinnon, his comments lacked context. That is a miscarriage of journalism, to take out one sentence of Nathan McKinnon's, what he said after the gold medal game, because you know that it's going to blow up. You said predisposed. But Bo Nix didn't like it. And you know what, Bo Nix, forget whether he was misquoted or not, which he was not. Just the fact, and Bo Nix wasn't upset about Sean Payton saying predisposed. Bo Nix was upset that Sean Payton would talk about it at all. That was the thing. Predisposed, indisposed, disposable, whatever word he used, Bo Nix didn't like that Sean Payton let out, because it wasn't just the predisposed thing. Sean Payton mentioned that Bo Nix told him when he was getting tended to after that game that he had other ankle injuries. And that clearly was said in confidence, and Sean Payton blurted it out. Like, yes, Bo Nix took a little bit more umbrage at the characterization that he is predisposed to ankle injuries, but he was just upset that Sean Payton would go into that detail about his injury history. For a guy that during the week, you can't get injury information out of him. National or local media, to be fair, at least he's consistent in that regard. Oh, I saw J.K. Dobbins stubbed his toe on the bench today at practice. Is he doing okay? How dare you ask me that? And then he just talks openly about the entire injury history of his franchise quarterback. He wasn't misquoted. But again, getting to the original thesis here. There have been a few times where the relationship between Sean Payton and Bo Nix got a little frayed, got a little tense, and to have a go-between as well. It's just another thing. If you want to keep Davis Webb, you probably need to promote him. And you maybe need to let him have play calling duties. Right? But also in the best interest of the Denver Broncos, it's better that Sean Payton takes a more macro approach to things. And the other thing, it doesn't hurt, I think, the relationship for Davis Webb to be the guy in Bo Nix's ear when he's on the field. And I think Sean Payton, whether he'll admit it or not, at least would quietly acknowledge some combination of those three things. 719-247-1313. Your thoughts on Sean Payton giving play calling duties to Davis Webb. Do we have the question posted on social media, Ray? Okay. It is up on our Facebook pages, Extra Sports 1300 and 740 KVOR. If you would like to comment there, or you could text or call into the show at 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. Not to belabor the point, but Sean Payton started it. This is the Associated Press article. The Associated Press, pretty well-respected pillar of journalism. Quote, the two little line things? Quote, what was found was a condition that was predisposed. Now, I think what is somewhat fair about what Sean Payton said is that if you actually read the full quote, I think you can kind of piece together what he was actually trying to say. Because he continued and said they always find a little more when they go in, meaning I take that to mean, and look, I have to sometimes understand that I talk about injuries and I hear coaches speak daily for over 10 years now. Like maybe I pick up on these things and the general public doesn't, which is probably why Sean Payton was a little bit salty, because most people took the predisposed thing. But he said they always find a little bit more when they go in. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. When you look at the play and you're trying to evaluate, the operating surgeon said that this was going to happen sooner than later. Now you go about the rehab, proper orthotics, all those things. So it's only one tiny little bit of it that actually gets to what Sean Payton actually meant. And he just meant there was previous damage in the ankle that would have made it not if, but when. But he said predisposed. He was quoted in multiple places as predisposed. There was a slew of media people in the room. He wasn't misquoted. He's just mad that people took it that way, and his quarterback got upset about it. Which I can understand, but you got to point the thumb, not the finger. So, there you go. Two sources. He said predisposed. 719-247-1313. At long last, Air Force women's basketball was able to knock off Wyoming. And I said this to Stacey McIntyre to start our post-game conversation. There is no bigger thorn in the side of Air Force over the last few years than that Wyoming team. And it's because the pace that Wyoming, it's funny. Air Force goes into most games, I think, trying to slow the pace down a little bit, trying to fewer possessions, right? When they go up against a San Diego State, a UNLV, these teams that are constantly at the top of the Mount West, these are NCAA tournament type teams. They try to limit the possessions in the game, more deliberate on offense, because they just don't want that firepower that is on the other side to get that many opportunities. So Air Force generally tries to slow things down, tries to make there be fewer possessions in a game. Against Wyoming, now the roles are reversed, and Air Force is the team that's trying to get up and down the floor, trying to maximize the most possessions possible, whereas Wyoming's style of play, thank goodness there's a shot clock. Because if there wasn't, we may have 3 possessions per quarter for each team. And look, there's credit. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball. It's not my favorite, but I do appreciate what Wyoming does. They are committed to that bit, that they are going to be the team to grind the game to a halt. And they defend for an entire shot clock. They do not let you get shots up early in the shot clock. And they run their offense repeatedly till about 4 or 5 seconds left on the shot clock, and then they go. And against Air Force, that is I got to imagine many teams are a little bit frustrated playing against Air Force. In fact, I know they are. I've spoken to other teams in the Mount West. They get a little frustrated going up against the style of play of Air Force. Well, Air Force, I think, gets frustrated playing against Wyoming. And even though there have been times where you look on paper and say that Air Force is a better team than Wyoming, Wyoming still ends up winning the game. And they have won every game up until today since February of 2023. That was the last time Air Force was able to beat Wyoming. So today's game and that 69-61 overtime win is a catharsis, certainly, for this team. And look, there's some seeding advantages that Air Force can get by winning this game and winning the next two, Saturday in Fort Collins and Tuesday against San Diego State. But I think at this point, it's really just more about playing good basketball and being as confident as you can be going into the Mountain West tournament. And with it still looking like the 8-9 game in Vegas is going to be Air Force and Wyoming, this is not coming from Air Force. This is just my read on the situation. I would imagine it would be difficult for Air Force, having lost today, to go into another matchup with Wyoming. The losing streak would be 9 games. They will have been beaten twice. And I know with the Jets and the Patriots years ago, that idea of it's hard to beat a team 3 times, not when your style is the perfect style to constantly fluster your opponent. I think it is important because if these two teams are able to match up again, then Air Force can say, look, we did this. We did this. Not to the point of overconfidence, but confidence. And if Air Force would have lost that game today, it would have been very difficult, I think, for them to envision themselves getting through that game. The inevitable matchup with Wyoming in the first round. So it was important to do that. And I think it was important to do that with how much Wyoming, and they're not that much different than every team Air Force is going up against these days, without Milani Perry having a huge game. There were times where I saw no fewer than 3 Wyoming players guarding Milani Perry. And teams are starting to do that. Milani Perry is the top scorer in the Mount West coming into the game with Wyoming. We'll have to see where they are at now because Melina Peterson outscored her today. But teams are just saying, you know what? Throw as many bodies at Milani Perry as we can, and we'll win the game. And with Boise State, with New Mexico, it worked. And for Air Force to be able to still pull that game out, where Milani Perry struggled because of the number of defenders that she was facing, I think that is important, not just going up against Wyoming maybe again, but going up against anybody. You know, Emily Adams had, 18 points. Jordan Devon had 16 off the bench. Eva Love, the freshman who has only played a handful of games, came up huge in overtime. Like those kind of moments help raise a team's confidence. And confidence is half the battle. You got to go into that conference tournament believing that you can make your way through. And I think we saw some of that when they were without Milani against New Mexico, that some other players stepped up, but they couldn't sustain it ultimately. And I said this on the broadcast, you know, to get to where they want to go, they're going to need Milani Perry putting up numbers. But the first step in that is to make their opponents respect everyone else on the court. In the last few games, I have seen Air Force opponents not respect anybody other than number 2 on the court. And for Air Force to be able to beat their biggest foil in that way, I think is a huge confidence boost for this team. And we'll see how they finish out the regular season Saturday against CSU and then Tuesday against San Diego State. More Drive Time Sports after this. Welcome in. Glad to have you. Appreciate you watching the show on our social media platforms, whether you follow Extra Sports 1300 or 740 KVOR. You can find the show daily on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter X. And while you're there, like, subscribe, and most importantly, comment, because this is an interactive experience. Of course, if you're just listening to the show, I appreciate you all the same. Just the better way for you to reach out would be to call or text into the show at 719-247 1313. Tonight, the Colorado Avalanche are back in action after the Olympic break, and this is going to be a wild second half, if you want to call it that, of the season. Right out of the gate, the Colorado Avalanche have 3 games in 4 days, 5 games in 6 days. I mean, they have a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday. I mean, the schedule is going to be crazy. You're going to get so much Avalanche hockey, or your favorite team, because everybody's playing a crazy schedule. You're going to get so much hockey crammed in to the rest of the schedule with the Olympic break. And it's going to be a dynamic to watch out for, because you wonder how teams' health will hold up under that kind of schedule. I think you can also see a team, with the trade deadline, especially just looking at that coming up a week from Friday. I mean, you play enough games to where general managers, this is going to lean them one way or another as far as whether to spend big to add to the team or to call the teams that are ready to spend big and say, who do you want? There are going to be enough games just in this next week alone that I think will lead to some GMs seeing how their team comes out of the break and making a decision on whether to be buyers or sellers. I mean, again, the Avalanche play tonight against Utah, tomorrow against Minnesota, Saturday against Chicago. Then they have a back-to-back Monday, Tuesday, LA, and Anaheim before they play on trade deadline day, the Dallas Stars. So it's obviously, with the Olympics, a unique circumstance that we don't normally deal with in the NHL season. But I think it's going to raise the entertainment value for sure. And it's going to be a tough stretch for all of these teams, whether they have players in the Olympics or not. Now, the Avalanche had a lot of them, and they had the most successful, all told. I know most of their players were on the wrong side of the scoreboard on Sunday, but look at the tournament in its totality, and the numbers back up that the Avalanche's players by far had the best tournament of any NHL team's players. I mean, these were guys that were relied on. Even, look, Arturi Lehkonen playing the hero multiple times for Finland, who ended up winning a bronze medal. Brock Nelson was maybe not, you would think of him later after Hellebuck and Hughes, well, both Hugheses for that matter, even at Tage Thompson, but Brock Nelson was impactful. And then on Canada's side, I mean, they're their most important players. So how those Avs players respond mentally and physically, given that there's so much put on their shoulders in Italy, I would imagine that we will see the Avs lay an egg. It may be tonight. It might be. Or it might be tomorrow night on the second night of a back-to-back going up against a talented Minnesota team. But as I say that, I mean, they got Faber and Quinn Hughes coming back. And how important were those two guys? How much did Team USA rely on those two? But we're gonna mark my words. Within the first 5 days of the Avalanche, 4, they got 3 games in 4 days. One of these is going to be an absolute clunker. And then you hope that the Avs get going after that. Now, to refresh your memory, the Avalanche right now, you look at their margin in the Central Division and you go, 5 points. Not a ton. Couple of games, right? But remember, they have games in hand. They're 5 points up on Minnesota with 3 games in hand. 2 games in hand over the Stars. So the Avs being 5 points up, it's a decent margin, but when you take into account that the Avs have played fewer games than their Central Division rivals, like the Avs have a significant advantage in the Central Division. And it would be quite the epic collapse if the Avalanche did not end up atop the Central Division. Which I think is important because they just need to see if Dallas gets bounced by Minnesota. Let the two of them go at it and then take your chances with the winner of that series. So I think the Central Division is important, but Jared Bednar's got to be smart here. He's got to be smart about ice time, especially here coming out of the break. This isn't load management. This isn't the NBA. Guys are going to be on the ice, but he's got to be smart. And we saw this with the Nuggets a couple years ago. You don't want to burn out this team going for a top seed. But you would hope with the cushion that the Avalanche have built in that they can walk that line pretty well. Now, the Olympic guys are questionable for tonight. They did not participate in morning skate, and to try and look around the NHL and decide whether that means that the Avalanche Olympic players are going to play or not, good luck. Because Jack Hughes and Austin Matthews are in the lineup tonight. Connor Hellebuck is not for Winnipeg, and it's all there. There's no rhyme or reason. Some teams, their Olympic guys are not playing tonight. Some are, but officially those guys are listed as questionable. So we'll see if they play tonight against Utah, and maybe that means even more tonight's going to be the stinker because they might be without their Olympic guys. But then we have kind of the next thing that's coming up, I mentioned in about a week's time, and that's the trade deadline. So Avs make the trade to swap Sam Girard for Brett Kulak, which is only half of the story. Now I think the other half of the story is what's most important. And that's what the Avalanche do now, leading up to the trade deadline. And Chris Johnston of The Athletic said this today: we can attach them, meaning the Avalanche, to all the big names out there on the trade bait list, Nazem Kadri, but also others, as the Avalanche are all in on trying to win a Stanley Cup this season. And why wouldn't they be? That last part was me. But I mentioned Nazem Kadri yesterday. And the question is, is his love of the city of Denver, the love of his teammates in Denver, and probably the surest bet out there right now to win another Stanley Cup. The Avalanche are that. does that outweigh Nazem Kadri perhaps wanting a bigger role with another team? What does Nazem Kadri want to get out of the next couple years of his career? So it'll be fascinating to see. And I wouldn't blame Nazem Kadri if he didn't come back. It's a different world now, and he would be he'd fit a lesser role for the Avalanche than he did the last time. But you wonder, those bonds that you have when you win a championship together, they may be strong. And Nazem Kadri, if the Flames ask his opinion, he might be like, yeah, go to the Avs. But then the other half, too, is can the Avalanche outbid? And that's the thing you have to keep in mind leading into next week's trade deadline. Yes, mathematically, the money works. The money works for everybody. Robert Thomas from St. Louis, throw out anybody. Elias Peterson, they can afford, of the names I've seen that could be on the move, the Avs could afford all of them. So to Chris Johnston's point, they're in on everybody. They can be. But are they going to be the highest bidder? That's going to be the question. What are they willing to give up? And it seems like anything, whatever. Chris McFarland is a kindred spirit with Les Snead. The thing about picks. But do the Avs have enough? I would be shocked if there was not a corresponding move. If the Avs didn't add someone between now and next Friday. But how significant that addition is. We'll have to see. Now, couple of injury things in the NHL that I think are significant and somewhat related to the Avalanche. One, Mikko Rantanen got hurt in the Olympics. So he's going to miss a couple of weeks. And again, I mentioned how stacked the schedule is. That's a lot of games. And Dallas has lost ground to Minnesota. They're now third. Now, I would still say that if Dallas was complete, if everybody's healthy, the pecking order in the West would, to me, still be Avs 1, Dallas 2. I think fully healthy Dallas is a better team than Minnesota, even with the addition of Quinn Hughes. But the Stars are in a position where they could lose even more ground, and that may not be the final order of finish in the Central Division. And you think how close these teams are, the fact that Dallas would have to go to a Minnesota for Game 7 might make all the difference. So Dallas is in a rough spot. If they're healthy in the playoffs, I still think that Avalanche fans have a reason to be fairly concerned. And I think that Wild fans should definitely be concerned. But Dallas might lose touch here over the next couple of weeks with Mikko Rantanen out. The other part, because yes, it is trade season, and yes, the Avalanche have opened up a lot of money. Sidney Crosby is out for a few weeks here, longer than Mikko Rantanen. Now, he tried to give it a go both in the semifinal and in the gold medal game. I think more of a try for the semifinal, and then kind of knew that he wasn't going to be able to go in the gold medal game. But now he's out, and the thought was he's trying to err on the side of caution so he could be there for the Penguins, who are pushing for a playoff spot in an Eastern Conference that is wide open. Wide open. Take your pick. Anybody can come out of the Eastern Conference. But he that was the thought, that he's looking out for his club, if you will. Well, now he's going to be out for like a month. And there aren't many months left in the season. So Pittsburgh, kind of the same deal as Dallas, except Dallas probably is in a situation where they can recover or maybe even get by a little bit better without Mikko Rantanen than the Penguins can Sidney Crosby. In a week's time, Pittsburgh may be out. Still not going to bank on it. I'm not calling it here, but that chatter has started back up again because it always starts back up. But when the Penguins are in a playoff chase, it's just more ridiculous than it normally is to imagine Sidney Crosby on the Colorado Avalanche. But they'll probably be falling out. I guess the way I'll put it is I'm interested to hear if there's any trade chatter around Sidney Crosby, any at all, given that he is out for a month. And if the Penguins over the next few days drop games and fall out of the playoff chase. The Avalanche of it all is a separate issue. Just, is there any thought at all that maybe Sidney Crosby from people in the know would get moved, or the Penguins would entertain it? My gut says no, but we'll see. Wild second part of the season coming up for the Avs right out of the gate. A Utah team that always gives them fits, and then a high-profile matchup tomorrow night where it will be the best two defensemen in the world, Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, going at it, and the two best teams in the Central Division right now colliding tomorrow night. So tonight's, I think, kind of easing back into it, and it might be a rough one, but tomorrow night's the big one. That's the high-profile matchup. And I think that given the stakes of that game, I think Jared Bednar is going to err on the side of caution tonight, with the idea that if he can have these guys more ready for tomorrow night, that would be ideal. Avs and the team formerly known as the Utah Hockey Club coming up at 7 on Extra Sports 1300 tonight. We have the Celtics and the Denver Nuggets, and David Adelman is telling his team, start looking at the standings. So we will do that coming up next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Tonight on Extra Sports 1300, you will be able to hear the Nuggets taking on the Boston Celtics. And the Nuggets having stubbed their toe a little bit, might be more than that, but let's be kind and say that they have stubbed their toe with 2 losses in their first 3 games out of the break. Bad losses, no doubt about it. They should beat the Clippers. They should beat the Warriors, even without Aaron Gordon. And now David Adelman is encouraging the team to look at the standings. And it's his way of trying to get the urgency level up. And this has been, you kind of start to understand Michael Malone a little bit more. Again, not necessarily saying that the Nuggets would be better off with Michael Malone right now or anything like that, but you kind of understand why Michael Malone kind of rode these guys a little bit. Because they are a team that sometimes has trouble getting that urgency level up. And Michael Malone had to, every once in a while, take his team to task. And David Adelman just isn't that guy. He's not going to do that. Now, it's not to say he's all sunshine and rainbows, but you won't have a memorable quote from a press conference from David Adelman the way you did over the years with Michael Malone. So this is David Adelman trying to perhaps bridge the gap between him and Michael Malone by saying, without calling his team out, saying, look at the standings. Look at the standings and see that we are in real danger of being in the play-in. We're in real danger of getting jumped by 1, 2, 3 teams. And nobody wants to be in the play-in. Nobody wants to go through that just to be actually invited to the real thing. So we'll see if this Nuggets team the next 2 nights, and, losing to Boston, depending on how it goes, is not the end of the world. Although, given what has happened with the Denver Nuggets, they should respond at home. But that Friday game against OKC, they better win. They got to get that one because it doesn't look like Shea's going to play in that game. And if they still lose to OKC, morale amongst Nuggets Nation is going to be an all-time low. Because you can't say that the most important player that's missing is on the Nuggets side in that matchup. If Shea doesn't play, that's the most impactful player missing from that game. And if OKC is still able to win, even in OKC, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow for the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, I did the Calvin Booth thing. When you have a headache, you take the whole pill. You'll hear from Calvin Booth if you missed it earlier, coming up in a little bit. But it's, when David Adelman was hired, he was chosen because his leadership style, which is very different than Michael Malone's, seemed to work. Right? The players responded to it. And now you're starting to kind of wonder long term if that's the right tone. Was David Adelman Mr. Right or Mr. Right now? Did the Nuggets need just a break from the drama and the weight of Michael Malone just bearing down on them constantly? But is this a team that needs to get pushed a little bit, to get called out? I think the next 2 games are going to say a lot in that regard. If David Adelman tells them, look at the standings, meaning see where you are, and let's pick up some wins here. And then they go out and they lose tonight against Boston and Friday against OKC. There are going to be questions of whether this team just kind of wanted the substitute teacher. And we all love the substitute teacher, right? They let you get away with everything. They're not going to throw a bunch of homework your way or lie. It's going to be an easy day when you walk into that classroom and you see the substitute teacher, especially if it's a sub for a teacher that maybe wears on you a little bit. Was that the dynamic with the Denver Nuggets at that time? Now, I think David Adelman is the right guy for the job. Well, the only thing I threw out that would be more ideal is the Bob Myers, Steve Kerr thing that I threw out early on, like the dream scenario of both of those. Of Steve Kerr wanting a change of scenery and with Bob Myers obviously being available to pair those two up in Denver. It's hard for me to find another surefire, like, yeah, definitely that guy would be better than David Adelman. I think in reality, keeping both of our feet on the ground here, I think David Adelman was the right call. But that doesn't mean that David Adelman doesn't still have room to grow. This is his first real year as a head coach ever. He didn't get to learn the lessons that Michael Malone did in Sacramento. He's learning this as he goes. So I do think that there should be a little bit of patience to say, all right, it doesn't seem like David Adelman can push the buttons the way that Michael Malone did, but let's give him a chance and see if he can. And this is him trying to press a button with the Denver Nuggets, telling them to look at the standings. I think that was always part of the equation here with David Adelman, is that you were going to have to live with some growing pains for him as a head coach. And also, let's not forget that David Adelman did a great job, not a good job, a great job when Nikola Jokic was out. And at the beginning of the season, the Denver Nuggets looked like an absolute wagon. So it's been, even with what the last few games have been, you have to admit David Adelman has done a pretty good job as the head coach of the Denver Nuggets so far. But what Michael Malone would do did work. And can a little bit of that get into David Adelman's repertoire? Can he, be the heavy hand? Can he be a little bit more stick than carrot with this team when it is necessary? And 2 of the last 3 games, I think, warrant him to be more stick than carrot. This is his way of doing it. We'll see if the Nuggets respond. Nuggets and Celtics tonight, late one, 8 o'clock. You could hear it on Extra Sports 1300. 719-24-7, 1313. Back after this. Sean Payton making the rounds at the scouting combine was on the Rich Eisen show today. And Rich asked him a question about the assertion by many that had it not been for Bo Nix's ankle injury, that the Denver Broncos would be sitting here as Super Bowl champions.
I think it's unfair a little to Seattle in that, look, they did it. You know, it's like I'm reading the Twitter feeds on the Olympic hockey, and it is what it is. And so the timing obviously wasn't great, and yet certainly can't diminish from the first 2 years he's had as a pro. But it's tough. Look, it's a grind to begin with, and then the further you go, the more difficult it will be if you lose. And so it's tough to get to that spot in the playoffs and then, you know, lose to another good team.
Now, what Sean Payton referring to there with the Olympics is obviously the assertion that Canada is the better team, but the USA was the better team on that day. Right? And there's some similarities, right? In the Olympics or in the NFL playoffs, it's one game. And that is a system that doesn't reward the best team as much as the sports that play 7-game series. Nobody wants to play a 7-game NFL series, but it leaves open to question more who the better team was. And look, Sean Payton's own player already did this. Before the Olympics, Cortland Sutton was saying before the Super Bowl that it should be the Broncos' end. He felt like the better team did not win that day. And just like I've said with Canada, I will say, and I said it with the Denver Broncos at the time, allow me to repeat that. Yes, the Broncos very much should have been playing in the Super Bowl. But they weren't because of them. They weren't the better team on that day. Now, the reason for that was some of the mistakes they made versus anything that New England did. But that's the way it goes. And that is what the Denver Broncos have been all season, is the team that you don't say that about. That they're always the more buttoned up team, the less mistake prone team. And they just completely deviated from their identity in the most important game of the season. But that's on them. And I'm not going to sit here and you know, say that a grave injustice has been made because the Denver Broncos didn't make the Super Bowl. Like, if the Broncos wanted credit all season long for beating Philadelphia and some of these other teams where you kind of looked at and you're like, are they really better? They wanted all that credit, and then now they don't want to give another team credit? So what I could say what I'm saying. What Cortland Sutton said was a little bit out of line because there is an understanding that you give credit to your opponent. And that's what everybody was freaking out about Nathan McKinnon's quote before, you know, it was cleared up and we actually got the full context. So shouts to the person who knew they would have a very clickbaity quote and knowing full well that that's not what Nathan McKinnon meant. But I said this, Canada's the better team. Play a 7-game series, Canada wins. Point blank, period. That's not the format. You got to be at your best for that one game. And Connor Hellebuck was at his best. The Patriots were at closer to their best than the Broncos were. But I said it at the time after the AFC Championship that, yes, I do believe that if Bo Nix would have played in that game, the Denver Broncos would have won. But I also said after the Super Bowl that the Denver Broncos would not have beaten Seattle. It would have been a better game, but Denver would not have beaten Seattle. There was more of a disparity between how good of a team Seattle was and how good of a team Denver was. Just not as great as there proved to be between Seattle and New England. So I think Sean Payton's bringing up the right thing, and he says it is what it is. Basically saying you have to be at your best. You, health-wise, mentally, physically, the way you play, you have to be at your best for one game. It's kind of part of what we love about the NFL, is that it is the one game. The series doesn't go shift to New England and then back to Denver and then back to New England. It doesn't work like that. It's one game. And the Denver Broncos weren't at their best. And it cost them. Canada got beat by Connor Hellebuck. It is what it is. But no, just to answer the question Rich Eisen posed to Sean Payton, no, I do not believe that had Bo Nix not broken his ankle, that the Broncos would have won the whole thing. We would have gotten one more Broncos game this season and maybe a more enjoyable experience for the Super Bowl. But it still would have ended with Seattle hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. But that what if, it's got to fuel the Denver Broncos. It has to. What they are about to embark on this upcoming season, this fall, is something that none of them have, well, I shouldn't say none, very few of them have ever experienced. Mike McGlinchey is one. I think Ben Powers is another. There are a few guys. But no one's going to take them lightly. There are going to be no secrets with the Denver Broncos. The book is out on Bo Nix. Can you do what is necessary to keep him from beating you? And also, it's one thing to get to the mountaintop like Seattle did and then start again at the bottom and climb your way back up. It's another to get to almost the top of the mountain and then fall down and crash and break some bones and get some gashes. Both require some resiliency and some motivation to start climbing that mountain again. But what the Broncos are doing with, they got to keep that in mind. What Cortland Sutton said, even though I don't feel like he should have said it, that's got to be kind of the rallying cry. They have to say, we were the better team and we should have been in the Super Bowl. Well, now you have a chance to prove it. Go right back to the AFC Championship and have it be a different result. It's going to be very difficult for the Broncos to do that. But they got to carry that chip on their shoulder. And they got to keep believing that, hey, I believe a very powerful motivator for the Denver Broncos this season were the comments that Sean Payton made 2 years ago after they lost to Buffalo, where he basically said, hey, if we would have won this game, we would have won the next one too. And the players probably were kicking themselves a bit that they weren't able to beat Buffalo to get to Kansas City, who they believe they would beat. So this needs to be this year's version of that. Felt like you should have been in the Super Bowl. We'll go out and prove it. 719-24-7. 13-13. Sean Payton at the Combine spoke about free agency. Well, wait, Ray, did you have something?
I was going to say we got a text
Okay.
from 719. I think Sean Payton should have told Rich Eisen he was the biggest contributor in losing that championship game. He's got some skin in it for sure.
Oh, 100%. 100%. The reason, the person that is most to blame for the Denver Broncos not winning is not Bo Nix because he hurt his ankle. It's Sean Payton in the way that he went about it with Jared Stidham. And I think part of that, and we'll get into it again at the top of the hour, but I think there was a little bit of self-reflection and self-realization like, man, I kind of really cost my team. Would it be better to have another hand on the wheel? I mean, Sean Payton's not going to say that.
No.
But yeah, it would have been as refreshing as it is that Sean Payton has realized that it is in the best interest of his football team that he turns over play calling duties to Davis Webb. It would be even more refreshing if it was like, I blew it and I'm the reason why we're not in the Super Bowl. That would be refreshing, I think. But we can't ask too much of Sean Payton or anybody, honestly, to take that level of blame, even if they might deserve it. What else?
Right here, still from same number, but maybe Denver does win that game against Seattle if Bo is there that day. Just like Canada was the better team, Seattle could have been the better team too, and lost as well. Unfortunately, we will never know. And then from Tom, Sean Payton to Davis Webb during the game. Pass the ball more, pass the ball more, pass the ball more.
Sean Payton's going to go over to Davis Webb's play sheet and write pass it at the top of it.
Exactly.
To remind him.
You can run it only if you don't, if you fake it, don't give the ball up and have Bo throw it down the field.
It's kind of like Pennant. It's like, give me 3 pass plays and then you can have a run play.
Yeah.
Or better yet, you eat your vegetables and you can have dessert.
Exactly.
Although eating vegetables, the comparison would be more running the football, but because passing the football is fun. Yeah, you know what? Who knows? But that's exactly the point.
Right.
I believe that the Denver Broncos don't beat Seattle. And in the Canada-US thing, you have to acknowledge was a crazy circumstance in which a guy who had been labeled as a choke artist, as not a big game player, had the game of his life and won the biggest game of his life. So that was what had to happen for the U.S. to beat Canada. What is that version? Something like that would have had to happen with the Denver Broncos in order to beat Seattle. I'll say it that way, but that is a fair point. Like with the U.S. being Canada, all even though it's not going into the game, the U.S. beating Canada would not have been a monumental upset. But the way the game played out, it kind of ended up being a monumental upset because Canada was the better team, and maybe we saw something like that in the Super Bowl.
Well,
but it would have taken something like that.
It's like Buffalo and Denver,
right?
But anyways,
right. Oh, that's a fantastic point. Josh Allen melting down the way he did in that game. It was an extraordinary circumstance that even allowed the Denver Broncos. So we could play this game all day that the Broncos were only in the AFC Championship because Josh Allen imploded.
Yeah.
So we can go round and around on this for sure.
On Extra Sports Facebook from Scott, the question is it the right move for Webb to get the play calling? Scott, sometimes Mama Bird has to kick the young ones out to see if he can fly. They can fly. His leash will be shorter than a pit bull's at a poodle paradise.
I love that. Yes. Yes, it will be. Sean Payton, and that's why I said, like, Sean Payton, this is a no-lose situation for Sean Payton. Either Davis Webb flies, gets kicked out of the nest and soars, and Sean Payton looks like a genius, or Davis Webb hits the ground, hopefully survives hitting the ground, and Sean Payton's like, no, you're not ready yet. I'm going to take back the play calling duties. Now, that's not the ideal scenario, and that would cause a little bit of doubt to creep in throughout the Broncos locker room, like, hey, or what we're doing, it's wrong, and now we got to make this drastic move. But I think in the end, it would be okay because Sean Payton would take back over, and you've seen with him as a play caller that they at least get to a certain stage of the season.
What would you say the time limit is? Let's say they go 1-4. Is that okay? It's time for me to take over.
It's never it's never that you lose, it's how you lose.
Okay.
So are you telling me that the Broncos come out of the gate 1-4 and Bo Nix looks much worse than he did this year, and the Broncos offense looks worse?
Yeah.
Then yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But if the Broncos just simply finish come out of the gate 1-4, that doesn't necessarily mean that Davis Webb's play calling is the reason for that.
Yeah, that's fair.
And we also have to see what the Davis Webb has to work with. We're all saying gotta get tight end, gotta get A.J. Brown, gotta get Kenneth Walker and do all this kind of stuff. Well, are the Broncos going to – and George Payton brought this up when he was making the rounds at the Combine. They actually don't have another running back outside of R.J. Harvey.
No.
Like, to be fair, I know J.K. Dobbins has given every indication that he wants to be back, but they are technically without another running back besides R.J. Harvey. And who knows what happens with negotiations. J.K. Dobbins kind of went through this with the Chargers. Is he going to be a little put off by whatever the Broncos offer him and decide I'm not going to come back now?
Yeah.
Certainly that could change. I think Calvin Booth talked about that with KCP, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's the offer they went to KCP with, insulted him, and that's why he ended up leaving.
They said they didn't try for the biggest push.
Yeah. 719-247-1313. More Drive Time Sports coming up on KVOR Extra Sports 1300 as college basketball. Hello there. Welcome in. Still getting the hang of this whole, simulcasting thing, and then we go away on one station, remain on another. Apologize for that. The conversation continuing on at 740 KVOR on Extra Sports 1300. It is St. John's and UConn to be followed by the Nuggets and Celtics. But if you have found your way over here to KVOR, you remain here. Thanks for doing that. Love to hear from you. 719-247-1313 is the number you could call or text into the show. And perhaps you have a thought or two on these, which are the three stories driving the show. All right, we are going to start with some revisionist history, I think, courtesy of Calvin Booth. Here's story number one.
Anybody that's really good at something, when they make it look easy, that was really, really hard to get to. A lifetime's worth of playing basketball, being coaching basketball, having conversations, scouting, doing whatever. For me to make it go in there right away, assemble a championship team, win a championship.
That is former Nuggets general manager Calvin Booth on a podcast with Kevin O'Connor, obviously lobbying to get another NFL or NBA general manager gig. But, he easy to come in his first year and win a title because he already had Jokic, Murray, Porter, and Gordon all in place, all acquired by Tim Connolly. Now, he put the finishing touches on it. Right? He did some interior decorating in the house, but the house was built by Tim Connolly. So to sit there and say you made it look easy, it's because 3/4 of the race, or probably even a greater fraction than that, was already run for you. You stood on the shoulders of Tim Connolly, which is fine because we talk about all the time teams that fire a coach, fire a general manager, get rid of a player, and then the next guy through, it gives them exactly what they need to get over the top. But when you're sitting there acting like you're responsible for everything that the Nuggets had, then I'm going to call you out on it. And I'm going to say that you made it look easy because most of the work was already done. You get credit for Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, KCP. None of those guys were the core of that Denver Nuggets team. The roster you inherited when Tim Connolly left for a better job got you most of the way. So please don't be arrogant about it. But therein lies, you can see why him and Michael Malone did not get along. Because Calvin Booth was probably walking through the hallways there at Ball Arena acting like he was the S word, right? He was probably walking around like, I run this place. No, you don't. And I got to imagine that Michael Malone and others in the organization saw right through all that. Now, I think Calvin Booth, his pleas to get a little bit more credit when he doesn't act like it was easy. I think Christian Brown, Payton Watson, he drafted him. Fair is fair. But just don't act like those were the most important pieces to the puzzle. But my biggest takeaway from listening to Calvin Booth talk about his legacy and everything that went on in Denver, although we didn't quite get enough into the spat with him and Malone as much as I would have liked. But I am just left with kind of the same feeling I had when Josh Kroenke fired the both of them. How arrogant, how difficult to work with do you have to be to fumble a wonderful opportunity to lead the Denver Nuggets through a sustained window of contention? Because they were in that. Now, they didn't go back and win another title, but they were still in the championship conversation. To be so pig-headed and so arrogant that you can't get along with another coworker of yours, so much so that your boss just has to say both of you are out. I mean, does it surprise you looking back that Calvin Booth and Michael Malone don't have jobs in the NBA right now? Because, I got to imagine that Michael Malone had that same level of arrogance. He's just not the one dumb enough to go on a podcast and tell on himself. He took the smart road. I'm going to go talk about the NBA on ESPN and keep myself in the public consciousness and just have some fun talking ball and show off my knowledge. But I got to imagine his reputation is still giving some owners pause, and general managers. And general managers, let's not forget, the guys that have to hire Michael Malone are the guys like Calvin Booth. You don't think that there's a brotherhood here? You don't think that there's some GMs around the league that may think Michael Malone's a good coach and go like, wait a minute, what happened? Remember what happened with Calvin Booth? Yeah, I'm not hiring that guy. Calvin Booth, we didn't think was going to get a job quickly. Michael Malone, a lot of people did, and they're both not in the NBA. I think you could kind of understand why. But my goodness, Calvin Booth, I appreciate him wanting to tell his side of the story, and I do think that there's some credit that needs to be given to him that really wasn't. But to act like he is the architect behind the Nuggets championship team, like, dude, you share that. You share that with Tim Connolly, and his name is above yours. Made it look easy. Really is a wonder that he doesn't have another job in the NFL. Here is story number 2.
I'm going to call some plays on game days. I'm going to have opinions with plays. Mine will be the bad ones. His will be all the good ones. But I want to support him in that. I can recall being in that situation. But I think that stepping back and looking at it, I think he'll do a fantastic job.
More insight into how the Broncos will work on game days, and that doesn't surprise me from Sean Payton. He always had that ability. He is the boss. Bosses are always able to come down and to say, no, we're going to do it this way. And that's why I say there's no downside here for Sean Payton. This was a necessary move given what had happened in the AFC Championship, but it was a move that Sean Payton could get all upside from, because then now his coaching tree grows with Davis Webb, and Davis Webb, the next step is obviously him being a head coach. And if the Broncos are really successful next year, I got to imagine he's going to be one of the top candidates. And that's going to look good on Sean Payton. And let's say worst case scenario, Davis Webb is not this wonderkind that he's been made out to be, And Sean Payton just goes, I'll take that play sheet. Thank you. And at least that play calling got you into the postseason. So I just don't know what the counter argument is that Sean Payton had to hold on to play calling duties. And I think that's what he knows. And look, he believes in Davis Webb. He wouldn't be turning this over to him. That has to be remembered here. Like Sean Payton may look at it and say, this is no downside for me. I take a step back. The play caller is great. Then I look great because I picked him to call plays. If it doesn't work, I can always reassume the position. But I don't want to go too far away from what the most important part of this is. Sean Payton believes that Davis Webb is capable. Sean Payton has never relinquished play calling duties in his entire NFL coaching career, and he chooses Davis Webb to be the guy? That speaks highly of Davis Webb. But if Davis Webb, the spotlight is too bright, Sean Payton will be there. And if there's a time where Davis Webb is getting kind of away from what he should be doing, Sean Payton will be right there to say, no. We got to do this. But it's the right move. And there's no downside for Sean Payton. There was downside if he would have white knuckled this and kept a hold of the play sheet. And let's go to story number 3. I apologize for this audio. Pass taken away by Love. Love going to go the distance. Layup. Good again. Eva Love feeling it. Back-to-back layups by the freshman from the 505. And Air Force has their largest lead of the game. It's 7. That's me on the call for Learfield. Earlier today, Air Force finally broke through against who has been the biggest pain in their neck for years, and that is the Wyoming Cowgirls as they win in overtime today, 69-61, rallying from 7 points down at the beginning of the fourth quarter to force OT and then to ultimately win. And there's a few things out of this game that are huge for this Air Force team. One is beating Wyoming, because I would not be shocked if 1 week from Saturday, I'm not calling another Air Force Wyoming matchup. And for Air Force to have lost today, they got blown out in Laramie. For some of the older players on the team to remember what Wyoming did to them in the conference tournament last year and during the regular season last year, I mean, it would be a 9-game losing streak to this Wyoming team. I would wonder if there was a significant amount of doubt in the minds of the Air Force Falcons on whether they could beat that team. And now that's gone. Now they're like, you know what? We did it. Doesn't mean it's not going to be difficult to beat them again. But they found a way. And they found a way. Here's the second part. They found a way to do it when once again, Milani Perry, their leading scorer and one of the top scorers in the history of that program, was severely limited. And what teams are doing, some of those shots from Milani, they're just not going down. And that's what happens. When you're a jump shooter, you go through cold spells. But what sticks out to me the most against New Mexico on Saturday, today against Wyoming, teams are just selling out with 2, 3, even a fourth defender not that far away. They are throwing everything at Milani Perry because they feel like if they can limit her, they'll win the game. And for a team to do that, and for other players on the Falcons to be able to step up and contribute and help beat that team, that is massive. Emily Adams had a terrific game with 18 points. You had Jordan Devon off the bench. The last 2 games for Jordan have been terrific. You heard the clip there. Eva Love gets 2 huge baskets in overtime, as does Brett Clay. that was a team stepping up and rallying around their best player. And I said this during the broadcast today, like, if you follow this program, you know Milani has lifted that team up so much. Right? She has held up her end of the bargain game in and game out for her entire Air Force career. So she didn't let down her team, but maybe it was about time for her team to step up for her and not make her feel like it's all on her, that if she doesn't score, then Air Force is going to lose. I think for those two reasons, a very significant late season win for Air Force. They retain the 8th spot in the Mountain West. They can move up to 7 if Fresno State loses tonight at home to Grand Canyon, which would make it less likely that it would be Air Force and Wyoming in the first round. But no matter how it shakes out, if Wyoming does become the first opponent for Air Force, they know that, hey, we can beat this team. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show. We will continue on. George Payton talking about some of the perhaps priorities internally for the Denver Broncos as we get closer to free agency. That's next on 740 KVOR. Ray made a great point as he was. I think Ray's doing a little George Costanza thing where he's leaving on a high note, but he brought up a great point and immediately turned around and left for home. He said, "Look, could you imagine the reaction if David Adelman said essentially the same thing that Calvin Booth did when it comes to Michael Malone?" Now, obviously, David Adelman has not won a title, but it just shows like you have to acknowledge what happened before you. And in that, Calvin Booth actually could have done some good for himself. Because look, if he says, I had a great start, a head start. I had a great team that was already in place, but I identified the remaining weaknesses of this team, and I went out and addressed them in a meaningful way. I brought in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I brought in Bruce Brown, and I drafted Christian Brown. And that turned a very good team into a champion. If he would have said that, then I don't know how anybody could really push back against that, because he's acknowledging what Tim Connolly did, but he's also saying at the same time, we didn't win a title when Tim Connolly was in charge. We won one when I was, because of the moves I made. It would be so easy for Calvin Booth to be able to have said that. And by the way, he worked under Tim Connolly. So is there no loyalty to Connolly and to shout out a guy that brought you into the organization? To be like, this was a really good team. They had made a Western Conference Finals, but the hardest place to go is from a really good team to a championship team. And I was able to find the missing pieces to that puzzle. Fantastic argument. Didn't make it. He said, I made it look easy. And not even I found the finishing pieces and made it look easy. Like when he says I made it look easy, he makes it sound like he built the Denver Nuggets from scratch. I don't know, maybe in his warped view of himself, he thinks he did. But we know better. We followed this arc the whole way. Tim Connolly built that house. Calvin Booth bought the couch, the beds, and the TV. Tied the house together great. Made the house a home. But you don't see me going around taking credit for building my house. I merely decorated my house. And some people have said that I am the Calvin Booth of interior decorating. I'm just saying. Wait a minute. That might not be a compliment. Nuggets and Celtics coming up at 8 o'clock on Extra Sports 1300. Right now on that station, it's St. John's and UConn. Let's go back to the Broncos here. Hear from George. Oh, no. Wait. I want to do this too, because this is another piece of that interview that Calvin Booth did with Kevin O'Connor that makes him look even worse. Here's Calvin Booth talking about Michael Malone's commentating career that he has embarked on.
At the end of the day, he doesn't deserve to be working on a bit table at ESPN commentating games over some perceived rift that like is basically gone on since the annals and time in every professional sport. Like the stakes were higher in Denver, like we were competing for a championship. But like relative to, I don't think it was. I think it was blown way out of proportion, honestly.
You really think so?
Well, that last part is interesting. It was blown out of proportion. What happened between you and Michael Malone? I'm intrigued by that. I would say tell me more, but I can't get over what you said at the beginning that because of your rift with Michael Malone should not be working for ESPN. Like, where is that in the rule book? Coaches who are fired aren't allowed to go into television? What a weird thing to say. And I think that kind of encapsulates Calvin Booth's time in Denver. Covering the Denver Nuggets and being up there for media day and hearing Calvin Booth, he's not a gifted orator. And that's fine. But he says some weird stuff. And you got to be slightly more polished in that position. I don't think he did. One thing I will say about his time in Denver, I don't think he was able, he invoked that Spurs team or the Spurs franchise, right? Where they were able to kind of change their team through the draft and be able to win. That's probably not what you want to do, invite those comparisons. But I think he was struggling to make people understand what he was trying to do. But that's also part of it. Michael Malone was very good about delivering his side of the story, his feelings on everything related to the Denver Nuggets. Calvin Booth didn't sell people on his vision enough. Michael Malone had the more compelling position to defend. I want to spend all the money and keep all my players and play the best players all the time and try to win games and all this kind of stuff. That's why Michael Malone ended up winning that in the court of public opinion. But here, Calvin Booth, with plenty of time to kind of get his story straight, still not. Why do you care if Michael Malone is on ESPN? It's not even another head coaching job on TV. If Michael Malone started his own podcast, would you tell him that he couldn't do that either? I think this is the sourest of grapes from Calvin Booth, that not only was he fired when he feels like he made it look easy being a general manager, but also the fact that Michael Malone to some degree has landed on his feet and he has not. And you can listen to the whole podcast with Kevin O'Connor. He doesn't do himself any favors. And there are some defensible things about Calvin Booth's record with the Nuggets, but they were any good point that he made was overtaken by 3 or 4 gaffes and showing that he doesn't quite understand what he stepped into, what he was given. And look, the market is speaking. I said this earlier. The market is speaking, and they're saying we don't want Calvin Booth to build our team. Not yet. We'll see if there is a team down the line. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, you will hear from the guy who has the position with the Broncos that Calvin Booth used to with the Denver Nuggets, George Payton and Sean Payton, on what the Broncos may be looking to do in free agency. That's next on 740 KVOR. Welcome back, Drive Time Sports. George Payton and Sean Payton both spoke at the Combine about what they may be up to in free agency. I will give you first George Payton on the internal free agents that they may be looking to bring back.
Yeah, I mean, those like Alex and Justin, I mean, those guys we'd love to have those guys back. We'd love to have them back. I mean, those, regardless of what's in the draft, these are guys, we see those guys as Broncos. If we let those guys leave, what do we do? Those are good dudes. And that doesn't mean we can get them, right? I mean, everyone's watching tape. But, you look at both. I mean, when you're getting your plan for free agency, look at the draft. Where's it strong there? Okay, maybe it's strong, a receiver. Maybe, so it's just – it is a balance, and you do develop your plan. So it is a good question.
I don't know that the option for the Denver Broncos is to necessarily go into the draft. I just think it's what's that? Three's a crowd. And it's a nice problem to have, but you have three linebackers that are ready to be starters, right? Dre Greenlaw, Alex Singleton, and Justin Strnad. You got to make a decision. If you are so dead set on bringing Justin Strnad and Alex Singleton back, okay, but then you're saying goodbye to Dre Greenlaw. There's just too many of them. You do need to go into the draft, but when I talk about the draft, I just mean you replenish, the Calvin Booth way of doing things. You bring somebody in like George Payton did with Jonah Ellis, right? Add depth at the position and then see if you can perpetuate the pipeline of talent there. But as far as the top line, I don't think that the Broncos should be looking middle line, inside linebacker early in the draft. But I just don't see how next year you have Dre Greenlaw, Justin Strnad, and Alex Singleton all together on the same roster. I think you have to make a decision. To me, the decision is I would give Dre Greenlaw another go. I think I would. I know this is, a couple of years now in a row where he's dealing with some injuries, but I think the upside is there. I think it's deciding between Justin Strnad and Alex Singleton. I think Strnad is younger. Strnad still has some room to grow, and he'll be cheaper. I think that's the right move. But if George Payton feels compelled, then I can't sit here based on the results of the season and make a strong case for Dre Greenlaw. I'm just looking at the body of work and saying I give it another go with Dre Greenlaw and see if you can't keep him healthy. I mean, we're talking about inside linebacker as opposed to running back with J.K. Dobbins. Like, they need to make sure that their running backs are available to them. I think you can afford to gamble with health a little bit more at the position that Singleton, Strnad, and Greenlaw play than J.K. Dobbins. But if you want to bring back Alex Singleton and Justin Strnad, would not be what I would do, but that's fine. But then you cut Dre Greenlaw. And I can't sit here and say that I feel, some kind of way if the Broncos did any combination of those three guys, I think you'd be okay with it. This is not a hill that I'm willing to die on. I'm just saying it doesn't make a lot of sense, and I don't think, to George Payton's point, it's feasible that all three remain on the Denver Broncos next year. And I think George Payton knows that, and that's why he throws in the caveat, well, other teams are watching film too. This is the Broncos being able to say, hey, we love these guys. We want them back. But when they get to the negotiating table, are they going to offer both of those guys what they can get on the open market, I sincerely doubt it. And then they'll be able to say, you know what? We offered him a contract. We wanted them to stay. Another team wanted him more. So I think this is George Payton just setting it up for no matter what combination of inside linebackers Denver has, everybody be okay with it because they wanted everybody back. Can't bring everybody back. And I think that's a reality that a lot of people can get behind. I just think you go Greenlaw, Stranad, and then later in the draft. Or, I mean, what happened to Drew Sanders? Can that be an option? The Broncos have money, but it's not unlimited. Right? And if you can make a shrewd move by shedding some salary or by not overpaying somebody, that's a good idea. So we'll see how that room all shakes out. My guess is it's Dre Greenlaw with either Justin Stranad or Alex Singleton next year. I would go with Stranad. We'll see who the Broncos value more. Here's Sean Payton on upcoming free agency, everyone else's players that they'll be looking at.
I'd say this, it's the same every year. You know, you want to make sure you're looking closely at your offensive line. I mentioned the running back position. I'm not going to get into detail with what we're looking to do basically in the offseason with these positions. We're always trying to improve our team. We've invested and we've seen good growth at receiver with the guys we've drafted. 3 of these guys, Troy, Marvin, as well as Pat. So we'll keep going.
And to those 2 positions that he mentioned, with wide receiver, I agree. You know, there's no Tet McMillan that's going to be available for the Denver Broncos in this draft. So to me, it doesn't make, I mean, you have 7 rounds. You can always pick up another wide receiver, sure. But I don't see where the draft provides what the Broncos should be looking for at the wide receiver position. They should be looking in free agency for wide receivers or the trade market. That's a position that they should be dreaming big and using every available fund that they have, not spending all the money that they can to retain their inside linebacker room, go out and be able to afford a true difference-making wide receiver. Drafting another Pat Bryant, another Troy Franklin, doesn't make any sense. They'll pick up somebody through the draft, but I don't think it needs to be a priority. In free agency, that's different. But they have the ability to be choosy. I think they should be choosy. But there are some guys out there on the free agent market or available via trade that I think the Broncos should give strong consideration to. The offensive line part of this is where I'm looking at the draft. This draft screams best player available, right? Last year, the Broncos did this with Jahdae Barron. It's going to be that way again. And I know that they always say it's always best player available. No, it's not. No, it's not best player available. There are plenty of teams that draft out of need. It's just a matter of whether, you know, the guys are graded close enough that the need outweighs the best player available. If the difference is negligible, it's not, nobody wants to reach in the draft. The idea just, okay, we might have player A who, like a Jahdae Barron, who we don't really, it's not our most pressing need. I argued at the time that, and I still contend that Jahdae Barron filled a need if he could have been an impact player in his rookie year, which he wasn't. But is Jahdae Barron that much better than running back X in this year's draft? And if he is, then you draft Jahdae Barron. But if the difference is negligible, you do draft out of need. You do say, you know what, we could get a player that fills a need and is only slightly, he's 2 on our board instead of 1. But I think the Broncos are just going to see how this draft plays out and grab the absolute best player that they can. Because I don't see any of the needs of the Denver Broncos realistically being addressed in the first round. Jeremiah Love of Notre Dame is fantastic. I think Jeremiah Love is better than Ashton Genty. But unless the Broncos are willing to pull a Mike Ditka, what he did with Ricky Williams to get Ricky Williams back in the day with the New Orleans Saints, they're not even going to come close to getting Jeremiah Love. But if we want to go the most pie in the sky, the best case scenario, it's that the Broncos find a way to get Jeremiah Love. But absent that, I just don't see a way that the Denver Broncos are going to be able to address a real need where they are drafting in the first round. And that's where offensive line comes in. That Philadelphia Eagles mentality of let's just keep stacking the trenches. We'll lose a guy won't show up for OTAs, some guy will get injured, we got the depth. I think offensive line makes all the sense in the world for the Denver Broncos with their first round pick. Or defensive line, for that matter. The trenches. It feels to me, other than the Jeremiah Love of it all, I think fortifying, getting another piece for the offensive or defensive line is a great way to go for the Denver Broncos. However, I am starting to hear that with the quarterback class being as thin as it is, and I'm sure people will start talking about, watch, it happens all the time. Ty Simpson right now is like in the 20s. I think Mel Kiper has a mock to the Steelers. Give it about 3 weeks, and Ty Simpson's going to be the second player off the board. And then maybe it goes back and settles down a little bit. A little like the Shador arc. Not with Ty Simpson falling as far as Shador did, but just the idea that people will start talking up Ty Simpson, and then you'll have a mock draft where quarterbacks go 1 and 2, and then as we get closer to the draft, Ty Simpson will start falling and we'll end up at a more reasonable spot in the first round. So with quarterback, the position that most teams are willing to reach for, without that, there's got to be another position that maybe teams will start to reach on, and I'm hearing that's offensive line. That there may be a rush on offensive linemen early in this draft because there aren't, I don't know that there are a ton of teams that aren't at least willing to see what they have in the quarterback that they currently have, and there's just not that many options. So as of right now, it looks like the Denver Broncos may not have a crack at a real first-round talent on the offensive line. But maybe that's where you pivot and go defensive line. But if there's going to be a run on a position, early thoughts are it might be offensive line. But I think, and not putting any name to it, we'll get into the names as we move along. I think a really smart draft pick for the Denver Broncos, picking where they are in April, is to just get somebody to be on the offensive or defensive line. That's just smart. It's smart drafting. The Broncos are in a position, I think, where they need to go big in free agency, and they can be a little bit more conservative in a way. It's never a bad idea. I don't think it's a bad idea to add to your offensive or defensive lines. As safe. I guess maybe it's risk versus how safe you want to be. And that's why I say I think A.J. Brown, getting back to free agency, I think he's worth the risk. I do. I don't know that Sean Payton does, but I do. I think he'll have a better time in Denver than he did in Philadelphia. But in the draft, just be smart about it. Take someone in the trenches, build it up that way. The depth, they're going to lose some guys, John Franklin Myers and others. But we're early, right? We've just started this. This is a combine. Players aren't even onto the field yet. We'll see how all of this goes. That's going to do it for the show today. I appreciate your patronage. Thanks for your flexibility. Jumping. The point, we stay on KVOR constantly. So if you're looking for a place like no matter what, you want to listen to this show, be on KVOR. And don't forget tonight on Extra Sports 1300, the Nuggets and the Celtics at 8 o'clock. Talk to you later here on KVOR and also Extra Sports 1300.